So we're going to start with Caroline, the focused future nurse. And so Caroline is a solid, strong student. She's got a 3.7 out of a 4.4 GPA. That put her just about at the top 50%, kind of at the bottom of the top 50% of her high school class. She has one AP class, but she didn't take any honors classes, so not super strong on the rigor. And her ACT is 27. Now, Caroline wants to be a nurse. And that was really why I call her focused, because that was her intention, is that she wanted to be a nurse. And so fortunately, this past summer, things opened up and she was able to do something that would help her to that end. So for being wanting to go into nursing, it's typically a very competitive program at most colleges. They like to see that a student has had some patient interaction, and they always ask the question, why do you want to be a nurse? So if you haven't had any interaction with patients, which had been really hard the last few years, it makes it much harder to answer those questions. So fortunately, last summer, she was old enough and things were open where she was able to complete her EMT training, and she volunteered at the EMS squad. And that was a huge part of her summer. During the year, she was president of the community service club. She volunteered at the local library, and she was involved in her temple. The other thing that she did over the summer, she was a lifeguard, and then she typically went to sleepaway camp, and she continued to do that even during COVID. The previous summer, she was a waiter and a camp counselor at her sleepaway camp. And I think we'll show you a little bit later in how she integrated this into her summer when we talk about her essays. From the other part, which is sort of her character and her resiliency, she has ADHD, and she manages her ADHD by being incredibly focused and organized, and that keeps her on track. But it also made her such that she didn't want to veer away from a very rigid schedule. But she had an injury, and that she had to overcome that. And I'll show you in a little bit how that came into her application. And then in terms of athletics, she ran winter, spring, track, and cross country. All right, so how did we integrate this summer? So the key things are this EMT training and being a counselor and a waiter at the sleepaway camp. So her rising summer, she learned how to relax and connect with friends due to her injury. Because she was injured, her foot was injured, she wasn't able to run while her friends were hanging out in the bunks, which is what she would typically have done. She was always sort of on the go. She would do an activity, then she would go running while her friends were hanging around. And because she was injured, she had to sort of stop and smell the roses, not to be too cliche, but that's essentially what she had to do. And she realized how it sort of changed her perspective. She put this rigid schedule in place so that she could manage her ADHD, and it worked really well for her. But then she realized that now that she has things under control, she can pull back a little bit. And that's beneficial too, is to have that ability to connect. And that's an important part of being a nurse, being able to connect and relate to other people. Her rising senior year, she was a lifeguard, and she went through this intensive EMT training. And that, again, gave her experience and exposure to patient care. And that was critical for her why nursing. And so all of those things helped her get into nursing program. She's still waiting to hear back, but she's so far mostly applied to large state school nursing programs. And she's already heard back from several that she's been accepted. So that was a very good use of her summer.
Oh, Lisa, we have two questions. Sorry to interrupt. We have two questions.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Sure.
So the first one is, does attending the entrepreneurship program offered by the Wharton Global Youth Program give an advantage to admissions like LBW?
Yes. So as I said earlier, there's been a rising number of programs at Penn and Wharton because of that. And I think that it still gives a slight advantage, because it will help when you're writing the essay for Wharton about why you want to be part of it and how you saw a little bit of that in action when you were at the summer program. And those programs are selective, so you have to already have a bar to get into them. So it does help, but I don't know, because there's so many more students that are doing all of these programs, I don't think it has quite as much weight as it did when it was just LBW, because there's just more people that are doing more programs. What's the next question?
Second question is there a law summer program available for students?
Yes, there are several summer pre-law summer programs. In fact, Penn has a pre-law summer program. American has some. So there's a number of pre-law programs. So we could put, if you send us your email, we can give you a list of some programs that are pre-law related. Okay, so now let's talk about Michael, the intellectually curious Catholic leader. So Michael was incredibly strong student academically and test score wise. He had essentially the highest GPA, the most honors and AP classes that a student could take. He was at a small private male Catholic school, and he was top ranked in his high school. So academically, fantastic. Over the summer, he had participated in a number of summer service programs and experiences. He did the Notre Dame Leadership Seminar. He worked as a counselor for Sister Pat's, which is a camp for students with cancer, with kids with cancer, and then he was a part of the Catholic Heart Work Camp. He also teaches Sunday school. Leadership-wise, he attended numerous leadership retreats in the summer with his school and also during the school year, and also served as a leader within his high school in the community. And during the year, he ran a hunger summit at his high school. He was a talented singer. He performed in his musicals, high school musicals, and he was also intellectually curious. He was interested really in everything and asked questions about everything. And so he really was sort of a well-rounded student. But when we talk about that angle and what his focus was, he really wanted to focus in on a faith-based education. And so as we pulled all of those things together, he used his summer experience at Notre Dame to expand his definition of leadership and really help him understand how we can make an impact in the world. His experience as a counselor at Sister Pat's exposed him to kids from various backgrounds, very different backgrounds from his own, and it also broadened his view. And then he used both of these experiences in his essay so that he could tie in his experiences with his Catholic mindset and faith. And that was important to him. But having those summer experiences that aligned with who he was as a person, and then applying to schools like Notre Dame and Georgetown and BC. He also did apply to Wharton, but it wasn't as aligned with his values and who he was, because it really cemented his desire to attend a faith-based university and the type of business leader that he wanted to be. And so he's happily at Notre Dame, and that just made sense for him. And so that's kind of how he used his summer to connect with it. He did a summer program there. That summer program there helped him understand that this was the right place for him, the right fit. And then he used that in his application as he was talking about it. Stephanie's going to walk us through Sophie.
All right, so Sophie, who I like to call the resilient baking entrepreneur. So we'll start with her academics, a B+ GPA. She was in the top 50% of her class, towards the bottom of that top 50%. She had 4 honors courses, no APs, in the Music Honor Society, dual enrollment courses with local colleges. And when she took the PSAT, she knew test taking wasn't for her, so she applied test optional. We look at her special talent in leadership. So most of that is with baking, which I'll get to in a bit, but she also was very involved in the music scene at her high school. She was the marching band leader for piccolos and flute section, picked her perform at the Thanksgiving Day parade with her renowned marching band. And she also performed in the community at smaller venues. She was a singer, self-taught guitarist. And she also spent some summer, like during the summer, she did some musical camps, but that didn't really play much into her application. She, if we look at community service and character, Active's best buddy member, caretaker to many immediate family members with mental health struggles and learning challenges. So that's a full year job. And in the summer, so she's also her second mother to her brother who navigates all of the above and a developmental disorder. And yeah, in the summer, when her brother was not in school, she would have even more time with him. So that was also part of her juggling act. And on her own, she just overcame much adversity, like so many of her students. But her real passion is baking. She is a gifted baker. She started at a local Ben & Jerry's. She was promoted to cake decorator pretty early on. And Then during COVID, she started her own baking business with a website, social media, super successful. And then she decided she was watching some baking competition on the Food Network, and the baker was local and owned a shop, which was a top-rated bakery. And she decided to reach out, I actually think on Instagram, and messaged him, and she got the job. She calls it an apprenticeship because she's learning so much, but she does get paid. And at one point in the summer, so while taking care of her brother and other family members, she was juggling 3 different jobs. Eventually it turned into 2 with her own business, very entrepreneurial, and also with the focus on this top-rated bakery that she worked at. So how did she integrate this into her college application? So like I said, this all started the summer before junior year. Ben & Jerry's is where it all began. And this cultivation of this passion is where it originated. The next summer, besides her own business, she moved on to this top-rated bakery and continues to learn so much. And in her essays, and another thing to point out, Sophie did not want to go to a culinary institute. She really wanted to go, so she applied mostly to business schools because she really wanted to focus on entrepreneurship, because she was very confident that she wanted to continue in this direction of owning her own baking business or bakery, and that's what she wanted to do after school. So it was mostly business schools. So in her essays, her why major essays, her activity sections, she spoke about her love for baking and being a business owner. And her baking experience ultimately ended up helping her gain a really generous merit scholarship to her top choice college, where she's studying entrepreneurship and continues to bake for her fellow classmates.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. I see a question here that is about what's the best way for students to find internships for the summer. There's actually, it's typically most students will find it through someone that they know. There isn't specifically a website that does it. There is a company that was finding internships, but it was paid. There used to be Summer Discovery, which I don't believe is happening since COVID. And there's also a company that's based out of Summit, and I have to remember the name of it, but I can get that to you, where they were getting internships for students, but it was paid. The best way is really to do it through a connection. Okay, I think I answered all the questions down. All right, let's move on to Noah. So Noah is the systems thinking strategic planner. So Noah was another very strong academically, top 5% of his class. He had 27 AP honors, almost the most you could take in his high school. He had a perfect ACT score. He got several book award. He got a book award, a National Merit semifinalist. He was an AP scholar with distinction. So he had a lot of great accolades academically. From a community service and leadership standpoint, he was president of the Friendship Circle during the year, which is an organization that works with students with special needs. And he continued doing that. This was during COVID, over Zoom. He continued to have that relationship. He also, over the summer, he was a counselor at a camp. He was there, went to camp many summers, really up until his junior year. And he created the Color War event. So he wasn't just the captain, he actually created the event. And so we'll talk about how that came into being in his essay. He was involved in athletics. He was a soccer captain on JV. He played club soccer. He played ultimate. He played rec basketball. So he was an athlete, but he was not a recruited athlete. But he had a very strong intellectual curiosity. And so this was the summer when everything shut down of COVID. So he had the choice to do something online, which was a very intensive research fellow summer at STEM Institute, which required a lot of effort. But it also created a lot of value for him. It helped him understand what it entails to do research. It put him in a position where he was working probably 8 to 10 hours a day, meeting with different people that were helping him frame his research questions, learning data analytics. And he was very, very strong in science and math. He didn't want to be an engineer. He wanted to do something more science oriented. And this was a good way for him to show that even in the face of adversity, he found a way to be able to continue to pursue his intellectual curiosity. He loves board games, fantasy football. He's interested in statistics and really how systems work. He was part of the Math Science League, Israel Engagement Fellow, and liked digital art. So he had a lot of things going for him. So when you have a student who, in this instance, is a pretty well-rounded student, we have to figure out how do we create that angle for him. And so one of the things when we were doing the brainstorming that came up is that he loves planning. He loves sort of thinking about things. He loves thinking about systems and how they work on all levels. And so he attended summer camp most summers, with the exception of his rising senior summer. The rising junior summer, he was a camp counselor, and he was given the task of developing and running the color war. And so that was a big task to do. And he remembered how much he loved it as a kid. He also, the following summer, opted to do an intensive summer STEM Institute and learned how to do research and data analytics. So for his main essay, a lot of people say, oh, don't talk about camp. Everyone does camp. But as he was describing this color war, he talked about having this Google spreadsheet and how he planned everything out and how he tried to do the sort of the rubber duck to camper ratio. And it was so elaborate what he was doing. And then as he planned it all out, when it happened, the kids didn't actually follow along to his plan and they started cheating and doing different things. So quickly on the fly, he had to recalculate how he was going to allocate the points. And so we just thought it was a really great example of who he was as a person and how his mind worked. And it ended up being a really, really good, really fun essay. The Summer STEM Institute gave him that exposure to research and data analytics, and then showed his further curiosity about science, and he was able to reference it in his resume and also talk a little bit about it in some of his Y major essays, even though most of what he talked about was how he likes looking at systems and he likes seeing how things come together. And so that gave him a little bit of information towards that. And he ended up going to an Ivy League school. So just so you get a sense of that's what a profile would look like for that. The next study is case study is long.
Some more questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
What's the question?
Well, there's two. One was, where did he go? I don't know if that was a reference. It was written while you were presenting about Noah.
Noah went to Penn. He ended up going to University of Pennsylvania. And
then
he actually got into a special science research program based on, I think, largely based on the summer experience that he did that showed that he had the capacity to do that.
And the second question, are there summer programs, non-credit, for psychology that are 1 to 2 weeks for exposure to degree interest, also ones that might have a research exposure component?
So I don't know that off the top of my head. There is a list. I don't know that specific about that type of program. But what I would do, and I'll show you kind of at the end, is just Google pre-college program in psychology, and that will typically show you a list of programs. We also do have a list of a link to lists of different types of programs by discipline or by major or interest. So that would also be helpful. I just don't have the specifics to that level of detail off the top of my head. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about Lana. So Lana, I call her the passionate champion of kids and individualized education guru. So Lana had a 4.18 out of 4.4. So she was just nudging at the top 10% of her class, right? A little bit, just right below. She had 14 honors classes and AP classes. She had 1420 SATs, which when she applied like the year right before COVID. That was actually a pretty good SAT, but now unfortunately everything's moved up. So that isn't even though it is a great SAT in the post-COVID world, it's not as strong as it was then. She had straight A's in 9th and 10th grade, but in 11th grade, there was a trend downward. She had more B pluses and A's, sort of half and half. So that was something that when we look at academic trends, that could have been an issue. In terms of community service, she taught elementary school and middle school kids science and math at a highly interactive summer school program in Harlem that was designed for at-risk kids. And she did this for 2 summers. So this became really the cornerstone of her application because she was so interested in education, and she was demonstrating that interest. She developed that interest in individualized education because of that program. And then after her summer, she got an internship that was typically reserved for college students, to work for the educational software company that helped design the individualized education. Other sides of leadership, she had formed a club. She was very interested in clothing and kids. And so she did a clothing swap with her friends, and whatever they sold, they put those proceeds to the Children's Hospital. And then she ended up actually training teachers on how to use software in her individualized education. So if she just did this part, sort of the forming clubs alone, she wouldn't have much of a story. But if you look at her summer and how deep she went into an area that she was interested in, it becomes a very different picture. So she was interested in doing education, and immediately I said, well, you know, and she liked Vanderbilt. She was looking at some other schools, but that was a good fit for her on a lot of levels. And because they have the Peabody School, which at the time was much more focused on education, it still is, but they've added some business and organization and some other things to it. We thought that she would have a good shot with that school. So she used her individualized teaching experience as a basis for the Common App essay. She communicated her desire to make a difference and the intellectual curiosity of how she broke down a science term for a specific student. She talked about her internship with the individualized education for the secondary essay, for the supplemental essay for Vanderbilt, which talked about her intellectual curiosity, but really about an activity. And then the experiences showed that depth of education was what they really look for Peabody, which at Vanderbilt. And thankfully, she was accepted there early decision. And so that was definitely because of her summer experiences made the difference. Now let's talk about Melody.
Before I talk about Melody, Lisa, for Noah, was the Summer STEM Institute that he attended at a university?
It was online because it was COVID.
Okay. All right, so Melody, the community leader and swimmer, is the epitome of don't put all of your eggs in one basket, which will make sense in a little bit. She had a 3.7 GPA at a small private school where she is in the top 40%, 5 AP courses, including art, which is a special talent I'll talk about shortly, and test optional. She did not send in an ACT or SAT score. So even though this wheel looks very skewed towards athletics because she is a gifted swimmer, really impressive and wonderful community engagement and leadership. She is a true leader. She's a member of a local junior city council, which she very much participated in over the summer, president of her high school women's affinity group, which she truly diversified through her time there, and big fan of transsectionality, and did it because this is a true passion of hers. President of the High School Consent Club, and also president of the local nonprofit food insecurity organization. So here, a lot of leadership, not only at her high school, but also in her local community. Something that is important to note to her story is that she has 2 brothers who are current students and on the swim team at her first choice college, the college that she really wanted to attend. Outside of swimming, her special talent is art, specifically painting and drawing. She does not want to major in art, but she did submit a portfolio. Summer art program for college credit. So she spent a lot of time participating in this over the summer and diving deeper there. And throughout the school year, she participates in art classes and she took AP art. So she is a recruited swimmer, and she was recruited by many schools. They just were not her top choice. Her top choice at this specific, very competitive, selective, small liberal arts school, she had to get in on her own. And for those who don't know what that means, is that she had to get in on her own merit, and if she got into the school, the coach then said, you know what, you have a spot on the swim team, but she could not get in through swim. She spent her entire summer at meets to improve times. And not only is she captain of her high school swim team, she's also the captain of her club swim team. And she's also the manager of the boys high school swim team as well. So how did she take advantage of the summer to help her college application process? So like I said, she diversified herself because she had to get in on her own. She couldn't just rely on swim. So although she spent so much time improving her time, spent so much time improving her time over the summer swimming, she also spent a lot of time with her extracurriculars, with her town's junior city council, with the nonprofit she was a member of, with food insecurity, and she spent a lot of time taking art classes too. So she really showed this college that she really wanted to attend, how she was going to impact all of her communities, not just the swim community. She's a wonderful leader. She's a talented artist, and she also is a wonderful leader in her swim community as well. In her essays, she discussed her leadership in building community as captain of her swim teams, how she was a leader of her school affinity group and member of her town's junior city council. But her personal statement had nothing to do with swim. She spoke about her creativity and art to show another angle. Again, even though she is an angular student with her focus in swimming and her focus in leadership, she is very much diversified and has so many sides of her. So the good news is that she did get in early to her top choice. And so she now can be on the swim team, but she got in on her own. And yeah, that's Melody.
All right. And just for those, what Stephanie alluded to, so typically for an athlete, you would do something over the summer, either go to a college showcase or, you know, work on whatever it is. If it's a time sport, it's very clear what the times are that you need to be. If it's a non-time sport, it's a little bit more nuanced. But typically a coach will give you a slot. They will support your application. And that's why it was hard for Melody, because she didn't have the support from the coach, wink, wink. So she wasn't able to get in. She had to get in on the other side. But having two brothers who swam for the same school, I think that definitely helped her as well. So just to give some perspective. All right, so I know there were a lot of questions of how to find summer programs. So now Westfield just switched from Naviance to SCORE. So you won't be able to do this on Naviance. And I don't know if SCORE has this feature, but if there might be a listing of summer programs on SCORE. For Naviance, for those of you who are watching who have Naviance, you have there's a thing called enrichment programs, and you could put in a search under enrichment programs under colleges by major category, and it will give you a list of programs. The other thing, which I mentioned earlier, is to do a Google search. You can do a pre-college program in X, whatever it is that you're interested in. If you use the term pre-college summer program, that will typically bring you directly to that program. If you want to see what's available at a specific college, you could do the same thing, pre-college programs at college XYZ.